So, hello to everyone listening in on this very first podcast that we are at Peterborough Presents making. And it's all about creating and shining a light on the work that we do and hopefully start some really interesting conversation around creativity in the arts.
Ooh.
Exactly right. So I'm hosting this one. I'm Julie Fernandez and I've worked in the media industry for over 30 years and I'm a full-time wheelchair user. So more recently, I've kind of migrated into from in front of the camera to behind the camera into production, and I'm an access coordinator.
Fancy.
Right. And so it's my responsibility to work with productions and organisations to make them accessible to the DDN community, and the DDN being deaf, disabled, neurodivergent community, right? And this is what we're going to be talking about today, right? Because we've done some amazing work together over the last 18 months, haven't we?
Yeah.
But before we begin properly, I'd like to introduce you all to the brilliant team from Peterborough Presents. Just be aware, not everyone is here today, but we will do a shout out to them in a minute. But we have got our boss lady, Aka Sarah, sat here on my left.
Hello.
Hello. Tell me about what you had for breakfast this morning.
Let's not go there.
Let's not. And then I've got, community producers. Are you both community producers?
Yes.
Right. Keely and Charlie.
Yay.
Hello. Whom both are amazing poets. And you used to be Poet Laureate Peterborough, didn't you?
Yeah, I ride on Charlie's coattails, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we've both been laureates once upon a time.
Yeah.
But our team who isn't here today is we've got our brilliant Kim isn't here, is she? And
No.
she does our social media, is that right?
Social media, marketing and everything else that we needed to do.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And then Louise, who...
On drums.
Louise, you're on drums. Right, so we are going to be having a chat about how in the last 18 months we've worked together at Peterborough Presents in accessibility, really, and how we've opened and widened the scope of what we do to 20% of the world population, which is deaf, disabled, neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, from your point of view, how this came about. And
Well, as Peterborough Presents, we spend our time looking at ways that we can encourage people to get involved in creativity. We don't necessarily talk about the arts because that can be quite scary for some people. And also showcasing and celebrating people who are creative in the many multiple ways that they are across the city. We quite often work in neighbourhoods, and I'll come back to it, makes sense, but we work when we go into a neighbourhood to do work. We don't go in and kind of say to a neighbourhood, right, this is what you need to do and this is what creativity is and this is how you get involved in it. We spend time asking people what they want to do, what they're interested in, and grow programmes with them. But when we were looking at our programmes and understanding that not a lot of people who are deaf, disabled, neurodivergent are accessing the arts, not just our programmes but across the board. Okay. And there's reasons behind that. That might be for a whole host of reasons. But we knew, just like we would in a neighbourhood, we wouldn't do that on our own. We haven't got lived experience of being deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. So we needed to work alongside people and to understand that and then to grow programmes together. And that's how we know, through working in other areas of our work, that's how we grow good content that is relevant to people's lives and is fully accessible for people. So that's why we started talking to you to say, how can we start looking at our programmes and think about what currently exists and how can we make it accessible, but how can we grow programme actually with the deaf, disabled, neurodivergent community?
how have you found the journey? Charlie, what differences have you seen happen in the last 18 months?
Oh, it's completely transformed what we do in such an authentic way, though. I think we've been really brilliant at taking all of the various learning on board and then applying it. But at the same time, acknowledging when we don't get things right and then learning and growing from there as well. So it's been an ongoing kind of evolving process, but we have new habits and ways of working now that feel completely natural and completely normal. But 18 months ago, we wouldn't be doing those. But they're much more accessible ways of working.
Can you describe what some of them are?
Yeah. So everything from a digital social media point of view, like alt text, captions on films, audio description, our call outs for artists. People can apply via written application, audio application, or video application, whereas previously we just had written applications.
So opening it up, the application process to be so that you can do video and audio. Why do you think that's helped? Who's that enticed to apply, would you say?
Not everyone can write an application. It's not accessible for everyone. So, yeah, I think people that maybe are neurodivergent, that can't write coherently.
Or dyslexic,
Dyslexic,
maybe.
absolutely. Visually impaired people, deaf people, like, anybody that, a traditional written format isn't appropriate for. And we've seen it work. We've really diversified, I think, who's applying to us now for
How have you seen it diversify in
people? So the way we work when we choose artists, we don't tend to choose artists ourselves. We will have a community panel made up of local representatives. So they assess the applications. And we found that actually video applications or audio applications, people relate to them on a different level as well, because they get to see the person or hear the person talk about what they want to do working with us. And I think, so it's made it more accessible for the panel as well, I think.
It's been quite good at just people, you get a sense of how someone might work with the community, because you get more of somebody's personality coming across when you hear an audio or a video, see a video application. So it's been interesting for us in terms of just thinking about how you assess those different formats as well. So really interesting.
That's really brilliant, isn't it? It's so different as well. So from making it accessible to, say, the neurodivergent community, it's kind of opened it up in a whole different way. Have we had more people applying, do you think, since we've opened it up to not just standard written applications?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm seeing more names that are new to us.
I think what's interesting as well, that people who maybe don't identify as deaf, disabled, neurodivergent are using those formats as well, because they're like, oh, brilliant, I don't have to write that down, I can just say it as it is. So I think it's opened it up, and like a lot of what we've learned is actually if you put it in place for one person, it opens up a whole avenue of kind of opportunities for somebody else as well. So, and I think that's the case across all the different things that we've been doing over the last 18 months.
You are singing my tune. We've been the people that have been working in the disability community and disability rights community, we've been saying that for years. The minute you make something accessible to the DDN community, the deaf, disabled, neurodivergent community, it opens it up to everyone else, and people actually quite like it. So it just goes to show, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. For me, even reading the applications, I'm not dyslexic, but I am a very slow reader.
Okay.
But to watch applications and to listen to them, I find I absorb them in a different way. So I enjoy having the variety of things. It's rather than every 20 written applications.
How have you enjoyed it?
Well, I would say that it's taken something out of what other people might find quite frightening about the art world, or what is considered the art world, which is you have to be fantastic at writing commissions and have the right phrase and know the right art speak. And I think it's taken that away, and it's meant that people have been able to get to their practice or their artwork quite quickly and then connect to people a lot easier. So I think, like you said, it's a benefit to everybody. And particularly, so for instance, if you're showing a really quite, highfalutin application to someone that is, works as a dinner lady or whatever, I'm not putting that down, but they'll just be like, they might feel a bit kind of like, intimidated by it, and feel like they're getting the wrong answer, or they're choosing the wrong person because they're not getting it right, because they think they should know these terms and know these things. While if it's just like in the form of like audio or video, they can connect to that person a lot quicker and understand it and feel like the kind of the fence has been moved out of the way.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, nice way of describing it.
Yeah, I would say, because I would say that's for everybody, that sometimes that's why people sometimes don't walk into art galleries or don't access arts because they think it's not for them, or they might get it wrong.
Yeah.
They might look like they're stupid, or they don't get the joke. And I think doing it in this way removes that.
But art is so different, isn't it? But you were saying earlier, you know, like the term art can be quite off-putting because you think of galleries, but then you've got street art and you've got all sorts of art, and it doesn't have to be posh art, does it? You know,
I don't think we do
art is
much
a
posh
man-
art.
I don't know.
Do we do posh art?
I don't think it's posh art. I think it's just quality.
Yes.
And I think that's what people can see. If it's audio and visual, they can feel that from someone. If they're really passionate or they're really going to be able to connect with the community we want them to connect with, you know, they'll be able to say, yeah, you know, such and such who works in the off licence will get that person. Or, you know, I know it sounds really strange, but we've got to think about that because they're the ones that we're working with. So,
Totally right. And so, from your point of view, what other things have we put in place working with an access coordinator, looking at everything that we do? What were the things that have interested you?
I would say the way that we describe an event that we're doing, whether it's a workshop or anything that we're doing, an event, we write it in a very different way. And we explain it from there will be an accessible toilet, for instance, and we're very keen on that. We will put that there will be like a flat kind of, access, and other things like this will happen, or you will meet such and such, and there will be tea and coffee, and we've taken it so that I think that it's not just about the DDN community, but it's also about people that might suffer with anxiety or mental health as well, that it is even a barrier to them if they're uncertain about what they're going to come across. So I think it's changed that, and I think that's made it more accessible for everybody.
So offering more information about the event, generically about how to access it, what's going to happen, that's just...
and not expecting everybody to know, this is the project, so you know what it is. It's a bit like, if you don't state what the guidelines and the rules are, so to speak, then people don't know what they're walking into. And I think that can become a barrier.
And I think a lot of what we're doing, we're introducing people to creativity in different ways, might not have engaged in that before. They might just not know us. So the nerves about kind of what to expect when you get there, it removes a lot of that because you can read about it. It takes a bit of the anxiety away from it, maybe. Yeah.
What about things like finding accessible venues? How have we found that here in Peterborough?
It's tricky in this city. And there's been times also where we've kind of had to sacrifice, I guess, our morals in that sense, because we're working, especially in a neighbourhood context, where there are such limited venues that require so much more institutional support than a tiny little creative program can bring to really make it truly accessible. But we also, I think, have gotten more and more confident at being able to hold true to those morals and think of other ways around it if there aren't accessible venues in the places we're working, and whether that's taking stuff on the streets rather than in a venue, whether that's creating hybrid ways for people to get involved.
So what would be a hybrid way?
So digitally as well as in person. Yeah. So whether that's a digital workshop that's pre-recorded or a Zoom rather than an in-person meeting. Stuff like that.
Because you and I, we went out and did building assessment, like mini audits, didn't we, to kind of start getting an idea of what the venues are in Peterborough. What was that like for you?
It was a great day out. It was a great day out, but it was so eye-opening. And it's, I think, given me the confidence now to go, if we're going into a new space that we've not been in before, to look for the things that you pointed out when we went out together.
So what kind of things would you look for?
So from a visual impairment point of view, colours and how things are painted or not painted. So like, for example, this table and this wall in this room are both white. So for someone that's visually impaired, they might not spot it. They possibly could because of the carpet being different. But things like that. Access, ground surface, any kind of little bumps as you go into a room, the toilet, the quality of the toilet, and whether it's got stuff stored in it or not, and making sure it's not stored in it and that it's fit for purpose. Stuff like that.
Acoustics as well in spaces can be
what?
really different.
Acoustics.
Acoustics. We're not going there, Julie. It's a different podcast. Different podcast, my dear.
That's the after. That's the after party.
So acoustics
Okay, I got you.
in a room. So we've definitely, there's rooms you can go in, and the acoustics in there, everything echoes around loads,
Yeah.
and it's even, for anybody, it's difficult to hear. So it's just thinking about those things as well, maybe.
Brilliant. And how about you? Because we went out, didn't we? And we
Yeah, and
checked a
I would
few.
say I definitely echo what Charlie said, and there's so much more that the venues learned as well. But I think it's this thing at the moment, isn't it, that, and I found I was a bit worried, concerned about some of the people that run those venues, that they would feel a bit like, oh, what are you saying, but they were all like, they want to make these changes, they want to update and make it more accessible for all of their communities, but the finances are not there to be able to support them to do that. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? So you've got to kind of try and find ways that are inexpensive to make it more accessible. Like whether it's painting a bollard or something, rather than doing the big things, it's about doing those little things that can make the differences.
I think that's a good reflection of what we've been doing as a whole, though, isn't it? You can look at how you make your programmes accessible and be massively daunted by where do you start? But it's just by some of the things don't require an awful lot of money and just a bit of time. And then you can start to pick away and do things as you go. You can easily not do anything because it feels so daunting and it requires a massive amount of money. Some things do, some things don't. They just need thought and time.
It's the same as, I think it's really improved, thinking about it, it's improved our front of house experience, because we thought a lot more about how anyone is experiencing the work that we do, whether that's down to, so we've really considered the front of house and that welcome. And I think that's meant that people have come back to stuff and felt, and then they will tell other people about things that we do and encourage them to come. But I think that's definitely, it's helped us with that, I would say.
One thing that's been interesting to me on that is that you're building trust with your audience, and that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but people start to trust you because you're putting in place things that are accessible, and we don't get it right all the time. We definitely don't. There's things we've done wrong. But we did a whole series of small bits of funding to support different events and opportunities. And what we didn't write into it is that the events had to happen in an accessible building. And then so we had a regular member of the public that came back to us and went, that building wasn't accessible.
Okay.
And we had to hold up our hands and go, you're right, we messed up. We need to write it into where we're supporting other groups, that some of the access that we're learning as a team and we put in place is how do we then share that with other groups, so and expect it as well, so that actually when we are building that trust, that people know that they can trust those activities as well.
Kim described it kind of as we're setting the standard of what's normal. So it's the same with our newsletters. So we often share stuff that our partners are up to or our friends are up to, creatively rather than just personal. But we have now asked those people, if they're sending us stuff to go into the newsletter, that they send the alt tags. And Kim's given some examples of what the alt text is like.
So what's an alt text?
Alt text is a written description of a photo or picture that allows people that use a screen reader to know what's in the picture.
Brilliant. So that's a non-expensive, other than maybe an extra 10, 15 minutes of your time in concentration and thought and putting it into the process.
And AI now, AI quite often does it on its own.
Yeah.
So you can either use an AI program built into whatever software you're using to do it for you, and then just make amends and check that it's
Clever.
right. Yeah. So it's not a long process either. It can take 5 minutes.
Sarah, what's been your take on it?
What?
What things have you found? Changes that have been made, access changes that have been made that have been, from a director's point of view, really powerful?
I mean, I think just as a team, how we've all learnt from each other, and the constant listening and responding and learning and adapting, and the team have been amazing at just completely soaking that up and embedding it in, and not just in the individual project. So we might do a project that is very specifically for the deaf, disabled, neurodivergent groups in the community, but it's about saying we're not just applying it for that little sector, but actually across the board. And the team have been really good at that, and we're constantly reflecting back on that. But even down to as a director, we've got people on our, or is equivalent of our board, who identify as deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. So even thinking down to how we pull our board papers together and things like that. And again, it's the same thing. It opens it up for somebody, it opens it up for the whole board. They start to see it in a different way. So it's kind of challenging it at all levels of what we do. But even down to, you did an access assessment for all the members of the team as well and things like that. And we do it for the artists that come in to work with our programme. We sit down with them and think about their support requirements. It's all learning. It's constantly learning, and not for the individual, but for how we embed it across the board. So it's been a brilliant process, I think. I think we've all loved it as well.
Oh, that's so good, because you've been amazing. Well, all the stuff that I've kind of chucked at you over the last 18 months and think about this and what about that, and you've all just soaked it up and really taken it well. And because I've worked with lots of groups and lots of companies, and some really embrace it and some are like, tick box, out the door. But the fact that you guys have embraced it so much, from my point of view as a disabled person, as an access person, is just brilliant. But I think for us as a group to open it up to allow our creativity to shine locally even more has been amazing.
Yeah. No, completely. And I think even down to when we did a big project, obviously back end of last year, called Reasonable.
Tell us
in
about
fact, you
this
know what? I'm going to. Who else wants to describe Reasonable Adjustments?
You start.
So,
actually,
fill the gap.
it was Keely that came up with
the name. Yes,
I'm very good at names.
You are brilliant at names.
One thing that's the project we called Reasonable Adjustments came about because we wanted to commission something very specific that really marked International Day of People with Disabilities. We talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah. So which is the 3rd of December, by the way.
So we've done lots of things that are general in our programme, but we wanted to do co-commission something really bespoke and work with somebody as a wider community and an artist who may be identified deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. But part of that is that working with you has really opened up the avenue, the opportunity to work with loads of different partners and for them to bring their experiences into that process as well. So we've worked with the RNIB and Scope and Disability Peterborough and PCVS, who look after the Disability Forum, and lots of creatives who are a DDN as well. And we pulled them together to kind of say, well, what do we want to do? How can we mark this day, and what sort of project do we want to be? And it was through that discussions that you kind of, we were talking and the name came about, wasn't it?
Because I feel like Reasonable Adjustment is, I think they are reasonable, and we should be doing that a lot more across the board. It's not happening as quickly as what it should be. So I call it RAD though. I quite like RAD. I think RAD's
good.
Almost on the borderline of radical.
Yeah. We love RAD, but we also talk, because Reasonable Adjustment is actually a nod to the Disability Discriminations Act, right? So in the mid-90s, I think it was, part in building regulation. So it was all about the business community. Didn't matter whether you were a restaurant or a cinema or a business, whatever. You had to make yourself accessible to the DDM community, right? But unfortunately, the law stated you as a business could reasonably adjust, which it was a massive cop out for so many businesses who went, I've reasonably adjusted. I've moved that box to the left 2 inches, and they do like the barest of minimum, not realising that there's a lot of disabled people who have money, and if they can get into your business, they'll spend their money. If they can't get in, they won't. So there was a nod to that, right?
Yeah.
Because this is also Reasonable Adjustment. Our project, it's a little bit political as well, right?
The most overtly political I think
we've done. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about this.
Yeah.
Come on,
I mean, just because part of the process was working with an artist called Faye Kilburn. Love you, Faye. And they created this incredible exhibition with a lot of people from the DDN community in Peterborough, and it was a pop-up exhibition, and we were manning that as such. It was in the city centre of Peterborough in a kind of empty shop. Okay. And what I found really interesting is that people were coming in to see the exhibition, and straight away it was overtly political. Straight away they were kind of talking about how in society at the moment it's very difficult. I think that's just a really bad word, very difficult. Really, really hard for the DDN community, and how it's getting worse. And so we're having lots of political chats straight away. It wasn't like some of our other projects where it might be a little bit fluffier, so to speak. It's a little bit more. And I
Can
think
you
that was
talk us
important.
through the exhibition? So we were in a shop that was empty.
Yeah.
So like open the door, walk in, and
I think it was, so you would see actual profiles of people from the DDN community, almost exalted, I would say, whether it was a portrait and then some poetry created by them. And there were zines also that were, you could touch them. That was unusual. A lot of people coming to the exhibition were a bit like, what? I can touch these things. You're like, yeah. So and
the touching is especially good for people with visual impairment or who are blind.
Yeah.
To make it tactile so they can feel it too, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that happens enough, like in art spaces or creative spaces where people feel like they can touch something. And there was also a set of chairs that were created that Charlie could probably say more about, that people could sit on and interact with. And it was a great space. And what we also found is that, as with everything, people were going, this is a brilliant space, this should be used a lot more, and all of this kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah, so
Charlie,
the way we got to that exhibition, so the partner Sarah mentioned that were part of shaping Reasonable Adjustment. So we put an open call out. We didn't know what it wanted to be. We just knew that we wanted to amplify DDM people's voices through creativity. So as Keely mentioned, the panel chose Faye Kilburn, who's a multidisciplinary artist really, but specialises in printmaking and is DDN herself. So she did a series of workshops in October, some with existing DDN groups, so like Disabilities Friday Morning Craft Group, the Campsites Visually Impaired Forum Group, Peterborough Deaf Children's Society, and Scope Young People's Group, and then some public ones that we held in an accessible venue in the city centre. So Faye did two kinds of printmaking that again were accessible forms of printmaking, one using like gel printing plates, the other using embossed, so that it had that tactile element. Then we started with the printmaking first. People came, they were all DDN, but it was just about learning the materials, having some fun, experimenting. Then when they'd made those prints, people were asked to write down how being disabled or deaf or neurodivergent means to them, what they want to say to the public about that. So naturally, lots of it was anger, lots of it was frustration. There was lovely, beautiful bits in it too. That's kind of how the political aspect of it came through, really, I guess, through those actual voices of the people with lived experience. So then there was the participant zines that were made, and also Faye, through the conversation she had with people during those workshops, took lots of quotes that then were printed on these various chairs.
Okay.
And the chairs themselves were also super political because they acknowledged the fact that central Peterborough doesn't have good accessible seating for people, which is so important for DDM people as a place to rest.
Which is interesting because Queensgate was one of our partners who gave us is the wrong word, but allowed us to use the empty shop, and it's notoriously bad, and they have these terrible little tiny seats that only like a borrower could sit on.
Have you noticed
they've
changed them?
But they've changed them all. They've put loads of,
take
they've
that.
put loads of, so like directly after our kind of thing, there's loads of sofas now in place, loads more seating in place, and you're seeing there's a lot nicer interaction going on in Queensgate and in the shopping centre.
Well, that's the
Isn't it?
power of art.
Yeah, I think there's something from Faye that I really like about Faye. There was the whole thing about chairs being something we all encounter every day in different ways, but it means different things. So you sit on a sofa having a nice hug with your friend or your niece or whatever, but sitting in a dental chair or waiting room and things like that can mean something very different. But it is something we all recognise. And I think Faye's really taken this on even into her future work about taking everyday things that we all recognise and then repurposing them and putting statements on them that make people really think differently about access. So we know, and we what we did, Charlie worked hard to get different venues and organisations across the city to host the chairs. So we had them in Serpentine Green Shopping Centre, we had them in churches, schools, shops, the Dementia Centre, and people were able to adopt them for like a month.
Okay.
But people have kept them. they've seen the value of what that did and really start making people think about access and disability rights. And they've kind of gone, this is a good focal point. It starts the conversation. So they are now a permanent trail in the city, and people are adopting the works that were created for that exhibition. So the life of Reasonable Adjustment lives on beyond that month-long programme that we had.
And didn't an organisation that had one of the chairs say that they're going to use it within their new training?
Yeah, the Dementia Centre. So they've just got a new community outreach officer that will go to businesses, organisations, whatever, and give talks to raise awareness about Alzheimer's and dementia. So he just happened to be there when we were going to collect the chair, and through a conversation with them, he was like, no, actually, it's been amazing to start conversations. So the one that's at the Dementia Centre references invisible disabilities and hidden disabilities. So it's the see-through perspex chair, and I think the phrase is on it. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it references this invisible and hidden disabilities.
Yeah.
And for so many people, because they've got a little coffee shop in the ground floor of the Dementia Centre, said it's been amazing for starting conversations. So he's going to take the chair with him now when he goes and gives his talks, which is, so cool.
He said there was a conversation where somebody said, but I don't know how that applies to me. But there was a conversation about, but when people don't talk to you, they talk to your support worker or your carer, and they're not talking to you. And then that whole opened up the conversation about actually who should that person be referencing and talking, why aren't you engaged in that conversation? But even we had a piece at the visitor centre at Ferry Meadows, didn't we? And Ben there said, actually, it's been really good. We didn't realise how many people just want to sit down before they, while they're for their moment in the shop before they pay. So they're thinking about having a chair there to long term. Do you know what I mean, to support that for visitors? So.
What a brilliant way of bringing creativity and politics together, though, right? And equality and rights.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
What made you bring a access coordinator in the first place, do you think?
I mean, as I said, we aren't. We don't necessarily, as a team, identify as being deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. And if you're going to work with a community, whether that's a neighbourhood or a demographic, I'm not going to think about what the needs of anybody, the support requirements of anybody is, or what their will is. You need to work with somebody who has that lived experience. So you not only come with that lived experience, but you come with a raft of knowledge of working in, through the media and worked in this environment. So to work alongside you really allowed us to, you could question us, but in a really gentle way, and challenge us to do different things. We have the luxury of having the central funding from Arts Council that allows us to bring you on board. And the thing for us was about being able to pay somebody for that experience as well, and that knowledge and skills. So we have the luxury of that.
But it's only 2 days a month. So
it is.
For a
we
lot
could have
of
you longer if we could.
But for a lot of our organisations who are thinking, I'd love that, but it will cost money. Of course it will. You need to pay for your expertise, but you might only need 1 or 2 days a month. It doesn't have to be a full-time or a full part-time position. You can achieve an awful lot in having someone just 2 days a month.
Yeah, it's the little things that when you've sat alongside us when we've redesigned our website and given us hints. So just the simple thing of, it's not an app, what do you call it, in the corner that you click on and it allows you. But our new website was people were able to adapt it according to how they needed. But simple things through that, but then through to seeing an entire project kind of run through, and for you to sit alongside us and advise us. So it's been quite a loose, I would say, contract that we've had with you, but allowing it to evolve with us as we've kind of gone on that kind of process as well.
To make adaptations to the disability community can be frightening because the feedback is we don't want to get it wrong, we don't want to say the wrong thing, we don't want to do the wrong thing, it's a bit embarrassing, and what if we get it wrong, and the language is quite political. So what a lot of organisations tend to do is go, let's not bother then. It can be a little bit too complicated. Or you just make it a tick box exercise. But you guys didn't do that. You guys absolutely ran with it.
But I think there's been moments where we've kind of gone, we have Millfield Festival. We used to do Millfield Festival every year, and we went to have a BSL interpretation at the festival. oh, wow, because we had a deaf performance company that came and performed, and we really wanted to make sure we had BSL interpretation on site. But it's like, how do we do that in a festival? So we kind of worked through that. We couldn't afford to have a BSL interpreter every single part of the festival, but we worked together to think, well, could we do a roving one? So we're exploring options that we could, ways of doing things which was within our resources and our capacities. So, and I think that's where we've problem solved and thought about opportunities and where we can make changes, because some just aren't within our capacity and capability to do it. We can't change people's venues for them, but what we can, there's small things that we can do along that way. And I think that's been being able to problem solve or ask really blunt and honest questions of you at times that would make us feel confident to kind of move forward with things.
And we did you did a amazing poetry night. You both of you, about a year ago now, and we had
Talia.
Shout out to Talia Randall.
Right, so let's
whoop.
talk about that, because that was a brilliant event and it was so accessible.
You just loved seeing
you.
Muff being signed. That's what you enjoyed the most. Yeah, Talia Randall was an incredible poet and just a wonderful person, and they've been doing something for a very long time called What Words Are Ours, where they work quite a lot with people from the deaf community, because there's an awful lot of deaf poets, actually, believe it or not, out there.
Yeah, it's called visual vernacular as well, which is
nice and
it's
it's
beautiful,
out,
isn't it?
yeah.
It's amazing, and they will at their events they will always have BSL interpretation and also captioning as well, which is really amazing to see, because
Captioning is?
well, captioning is like video captioning. So if someone doesn't understand BSL, they can actually read on screen, either behind the poet or next to them, what they're saying.
Okay.
And I think that's really difficult as well for a BSL, because sometimes poets like to waffle on like I do. But from
Is that true, Charlie?
no comment.
unless you're going and you're very organised and know what you're going to say. But I think from my personal point of view as a poet doing that, it was so amazing to have people from the deaf and disabled community access my work, and to have them laughing at
Muff
poems, was just amazing, and it just broadened out the audience, and just I thought it was wonderful.
It was definitely the catalyst for me wanting to learn BSL.
Okay. Now you've really gotten into it,
Yeah,
right?
well, I produced Talia's book launch, so in my spare time, so I organised.
Of course you did.
Of course I did.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say Talia's thing wasn't a Peterborough Presents thing.
Yes,
but
it was.
what is
Oh,
amazing, no, it's fine. I think what it shows though is that the interest and that we have about just accessibility in all different programmes, and we enjoy being part of that, as not just through our own work but in other ways.
But also because of the type of work we're doing with Peterborough Presents, people feel confident to ask us to do stuff like that, because we have an understanding and we want to understand and improve. So
But go on, tell us
But
about
yeah,
BSL.
so thankfully work have paid for me to learn BSL level 1. And it's been, level 1. It's been, sensational. I've loved and embraced every second of it. But the connections through Peterborough Presents and just going to these BSL classes. So the teacher, Charlene, that's her sign name.
Okay.
Charlene.
Showing off with your BSL
I know.
now.
Mine's this, so C and then, which Charlene gave me for my tattoos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
Charlie.
But anyway, so she works with Amy, who runs Peterborough Deaf Children's Society, who was part of the panel for Reasonable Adjustment, and they had their own bespoke workshop with Faye. And the deaf community were a huge part of the resulting exhibition. So the crossovers immediately from just going to those classes has been amazing. But then I was also able to use it immediately at one of those workshops. So we were tidying up at the end and preparing for the next day, because it was the Saturday, and we also had workshops in the Sunday, so we're just setting the space. And one of the dads, bless him, he started tidying up after us because he thought he was helping. So I was like, nah, tomorrow's the same. And he understood. So I was like, I can talk to people. It was wicked. It was wicked.
Brilliant.
And then we did our Christmas carol, didn't we?
Yeah.
On social media as our way of saying,
Did you?
yeah, we did. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Christmas
Okay.
in site BSL, and we had about 9,500 views of that video over Christmas.
That was all me.
That
though.
was-
I was just watching my I think to be honest with you, like it's with the BSL or anything, you know, we've done poetry performances where we might be the only English speaking poet on, and then there'll be Lithuanian or other Eastern European poets and they perform in their own language, and I think I've still got so much from that. If you enjoy language and enjoy, you know, people expressing themselves, then, you know, I think it's amazing if they can do that in BSL or anything. But I know personally, I know a little bit of Makaton, which is almost like the baby version of BSL. And I know even from my experience, there's a gentleman that is deaf that uses the bus that I use. And one day I dropped something and he picked it up and I said thank you, and he was like,
Wow.
and then I was like, please don't ask me for anything else.
Yeah.
But from that now he will smile and say hello. And it's created a lovely connection. So just those simple things, that's all you need to do really, isn't it?
Amazing. So we did reasonable adjustments last year to celebrate International Day of Disabled People on the 3rd of December, but we also did some micro commissions. Keely, tell me about those micro commissions.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we wanted to have the bigger commissions, but we wanted to try experiment really with maybe people that live a bit more locally or don't consider themselves artists, or so they get an opportunity to trial something that they're really interested in and want to share with others from the DDN community. So we had Fiona, and they are amazing, do something called scratch building, which is the kind of models that people can create and use if you're into like Dungeons and Dragons or role modelling gaming.
Yeah.
I'm so old.
RPG.
Thank you very much.
RPG.
Charlie.
But no, it's also, scratch building's also just sculptures really out of junk and materials you throw away.
And that was amazing. And then we also had Gold A Arts, love Gold A Arts, that are a kind of charity that have a lot of people from the DDN community use them day to day, and they put on a fashion show.
Which was brilliant. I went and watched and it was awesome.
They were clearly loving it.
They
weren't
were
as well?
clearly loving it.
And we've also got a magic show with JJ from Magic Touch, which hopefully will be coming up by the end of February. And we were just able to take chances on stuff that maybe we wouldn't do normally.
Okay.
And then just work with people that we've not worked with before. And from that, it's created new connections. And, it's really nice, like, Gold Hay recently were like, have you got a big projector screen that we can borrow? Or what? But it's important because, you create those kind of like lifelines where you can support each other, which is really important, I think.
How did you find the micro commissions? Good?
It's great, yeah. I went to Fee's scratch building just as a participant with my partner. So
brilliant.
it was great. We built Batty from Fern Gully to go as a Christmas tree topper. It was amazing. But yeah, one thing I think we haven't mentioned so far also is Sunny's listening residency. And to be completely transparent for anyone in the sector, like, I think a privilege for us is that we can flex with our budget, because we put one main residency out there, but the panel, so Sunny had applied for the main residency, and it came down to between Faye and Sunny, and the panel loved the fact that Sunny lives in Peterborough and is a local creative, but maybe didn't have as formalised of an idea as Faye for what the project would do. But the panel still really wanted to support Sunny, so we found some budget to give him a listening residency, which was an ability for him to chat and have conversations with the various partners in the project and individuals that are DDN, and then kind of bring people together for a kind of a talking workshop, really, an open chat we called it, which was again an unfiltered space for people to share the realities of their lived experience and what things they might want to see creatively come off the back of that. And again, it was so powerful to be in that room and hear those authentic voices of people talking about what the barriers they face, the kind of the bits where they do find joy and strength, a good old moan about local infrastructure being awful, and but also the how being in, so we were in the exhibition space, so we were surrounded by all this artwork as well that captures some of that lived experience, and it was just really important, I think, that we did that as well, and were able to listen to what the panel were telling us about really wanting to support Sunny, but then also provide a space for other people to just talk, and then hopefully we will grow with Sunny whatever project comes off the back of that initial conversation.
But I would also say as well, like when there's something like the RAD Commission or Reasonable Adjustment, you feel like you've got to be all things to everybody from the DDN community. It's so difficult, like time-wise, budget, to kind of hit as many people as you'd like to do. So doing something like what we did with Sunny and the micro commissions, we were able to speak to a lot more of that community. If, it was a lot more disseminated. That's a nice word, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was even from the outset when we sat together with everybody and even came up with that initial name of Reasonable Adjustment, or RAD, we were quite honest and said, right, this is the pocket of funding we've got. We can throw all of this at one person, one artist, or do we want to split it up? And it was with that group. So should we have some smaller commissions, small pockets of funding that we can give to people and work with them to put these events on, as well as having an artist thing? And it was the group, because we collectively went, that's going to allow us to reach a much wider audience and have a reach. And then they interconnect. So somebody who's been involved in a micro commission might go to the exhibition and things like that.
That did happen.
And then beyond that, when we we got all the proposals in and we saw Sunny and Faye, we were able to they said, can we do this split so we can give a bit of funding there? So it was very much about not us just owning all the cards and having that power, but actually going, right, collectively, how do we want to do it? How can we make this?
What's really interesting as well is nothing can ever be fully accessible.
No.
And that's an interesting concept, because if you make something accessible for one sector of the DDN community, it unfortunately can then make it inaccessible to another sector of the disability community. So that's a big lesson to learn as well, because you want to be everything to everyone, but you can't be, but you can do your best to make a little bit of as much as across the board as possible, unless you're making it specifically accessible to one sector.
But I would say that's better than not doing anything at all, because you're frightened of getting it wrong.
Correct.
Which happens a lot. I think it's better to make an effort, and then if, say, someone from that community say, well, actually, this is not quite right, and that would have been better if you'd done this, and surely it's better for us to take that on board and take it forward than to not do anything at all, and those people are not involved in our programme. I would say it's much better to make an effort.
Absolutely. And so I've got brittle bone disease. I use a wheelchair full time. If you had 5 people with brittle bones who are wheelchair users in the room, we'll all have a commonality, but every one of us will have nuanced differences, and it's the same for every health condition. Yeah. So you can't be perfect. It can't be 100%, but you can do lots of things that make it accessible to lots of people. That doesn't necessarily cost money, because the biggest thing there's been 2 things that have been overtly preventative in making life accessible for disabled people. One is companies and businesses saying it's going to cost too much. And then it's attitude, right? And it can cost, but if you start from the beginning incorporating disability into your design, and rather than retrospectively fitting, you open yourself up to 20% of the world population. Yeah. The Purple Pound, which is the collective spending power of disabled people and their families' money, in the UK is £279 billion a year. So if you don't make yourself accessible, we can't get in and spend our money. Yeah. And then you've kind of got that whole attitudinal change as well. So it can be a bit complicated.
And just as an attitudinal thing from the team, and I'm going to blow the trumpets of the staff team here,
Absolutely.
Is that even before Reasonable Adjustment, we were doing a project in a rural village.
Yes.
And Keely's actually from there. And we'd thrown out a proposal. It was about a light-based project that we wanted to do, and we were contacted by Hannah, who lives in the village. Yep. Amazing. Been on had some brilliant adventures with Hannah over the last 18 months. But she was very concerned about flashing lights in the village because she has a response to that that isn't necessarily positive, and it really impacts on her life. And she was really nervous about it. And rather than us kind of feeling a bit like, oh, don't get and put a dampener on our project, it's kind of Keely and the team, we sat down and went, actually, well, let's just invite Hannah onto the panel to decide on what project goes forward, and welcomed her into that group of people. And Hannah was able to put forward her ideas and thoughts about all the proposals that came forward, and was massively involved in deciding which project we went forward with. And it was from that we said, right, all the way through our marketing, no flashing lights. We had more people turning up to that event that clearly had support requirements and things like that within the audience. So having Hannah on that journey with us opened it up for a whole stack load more people.
So many people say, where is it a bit quieter on the parade? Well, we know it will be at the back because that's where Hannah's going to be. Or, people say, we just had loads more kind of people. I think there's something as well about, like, when we talk about disability, I think we need to be honest that at some point, most of it, a bit like mental health, there's this 1 in 4 figure or whatever, but let's be honest, most people are going to experience mental health, whether that's grief or a loss of a relationship or whatever it is, because mental health is about where you can no longer kind of find that balance in life because these things happen. And it's the same with disability. I know at some point there might be, my knees might be a bit more rickety than they used to be, and I'm going to need some adjustments, reasonable adjustments to get through my life. So it's kind of like, well, what about that? And everyone's just this assumption, well, you have to have like a leg missing, or you've got to be using a wheelchair to be disabled, not like I can't hear as much as I used to, or I've got arthritis now, or these are things that mean that you aren't able to access your life as well as maybe you used to, or
that can be quite a temporary or a permanent thing. But we talk about that 20% of the population, isn't it? But actually it's probably way beyond that. People who can't,
And what we've noticed as well, there's a massive, massive increase in neurodivergence, especially autism and ADHD in women, right? And that's because for so long it was seen as a male disease, and women are very good at masking, right? And I think COVID and the situation has caused almost like a boom of people recognising in themselves their own neurodivergence. It's awfully hard to get a diagnosis. It can take up to 5 years now. So a lot of people are self-diagnosing. So why I'm going down this is because some of the things to do with the Eye Lantern Festival was about making it accessible, because the vast majority of people that I work with now as an access coordinator in making things accessible are people who are neurodivergent. I would say 70% neuro, 30% everything else, right? And it's things like, do you have a quiet room, fidget toys, noise cancelling headset, where is it quieter on the parade, not having the flashing lights, not having too much loudness. So it's all about making it accessible, and then all of a sudden people will start coming.
I mean, it opened it up for people from the elder community. It opened it up for so many people. I mean, today in the news, when they're saying they can't keep up with the demand for ADHD medication in schools and with children, and then schools are now being told that they need to make reasonable adjustments with their curriculum to face that. You're like, well, I mean, isn't it a case, particularly with COVID, that a lot more people, everything seemed to break down a lot more, so everybody was a lot more open of saying, well, actually, I'm quite anxious about this and I'm not certain about this. And
it also opened it up in a really positive way as well, which we don't talk about enough. So there was an article I read about a young woman who is physically disabled that was at university, and one of her lectures was on a floor, no lift, she couldn't go to, and the university wouldn't do anything for a couple of years about making it accessible to her. And then COVID hit, and then we were all working from home, and then all of a sudden everything went online, and she could access for the first time her course. And we, the disabled community, the DDN committee, right, it's because it's affecting you now, you're sorting it out. Right, it's taken this long, but I mean, at least it has. So what I mean about positive side of COVID, because obviously it was horrendous for the DDN community.
Yeah.
60% of people who passed away and died from COVID in the UK were DDN, right? So it was utterly horrendous, but that's a different side. The positive side was all of a sudden things started to become more accessible. So, you know, disabled people could go like, oh, I could actually start working for this company, because if we're working from home more and we're dialing in more, you know, all of it, and you could then attend an event online, things started to blossom and open up, which is an interesting
But
subject.
it's something that we did some training with you long before you were an access coordinator, and you talked about the social model versus the medical model of society that we're presently in. And it completely blew my mind, because you talked about it in the way that you were kind of like, well, if everybody had the ability to have like a slightly bigger toilet or a slightly bigger seat on a train or a slightly, everybody would benefit and everybody would love that. Because, you know, and I just think, well, yeah, the social model is much more about how does it impact everyone and how does it make everybody's life better. And I think like COVID, in some respects, it did that. It kind of levelled the playing field a bit. Well, the medical model that's going at the moment is almost like survival of the fittest. Well, we're not really we can't stay in that world anymore. It's not working, is it?
No.
But you talk that even about you're talking about digital there as well. So obviously, within Reasonable Adjustment, we did kind of Faye created the videos, and we did call outs on social media that people could submit things, as well as in-person workshops. We had the exhibition. You could listen to the audio description of the exhibition online before you even went there, or just in its own right, which was amazing, by the way. Always have an audio description in every exhibition going forward, because I loved it as well.
What did you love about it?
I think it goes back to what Keely was saying before. Quite often you go into a gallery and you feel like you're automatically meant to understand what that piece of artwork is. And I've grown up in that visual arts world.
Okay.
But hearing Faye's description of her work brought a completely different angle on the work, made you see it in a very different way, and gave me the real personal human touch to connection to her work. So for me, just like, and there were many other people who said that it opened up a whole different view on the work. So it wasn't just people who were visually impaired that really appreciated that. I think it gave lots of people different angles in. Certainly for me, I'd listened to that and read it, and then a gentleman came into the gallery whose wife, I think, was disabled, and we had a 40-minute conversation because I was talking about Faye's work and that audio description about how she sees the world and things like that, and the conversation, 40 minutes later we were still yabbering on in the exhibition, but it's it opened up a whole extra layer of conversation around the work.
So we had the brilliant Fee basically be in the space, in the shop, in the space, right, every day. And Fee has, when we had our meeting a couple of weeks ago, it was a couple of weeks ago now, wasn't it? And we were catching up about it. Fee said some really interesting things, that how political it was, how much people were almost wanting Peterborough to have somewhere that the DDN community can go to. Can you remember what she was saying?
Yeah, so they were saying how passers-by who didn't know about it until they walked past came in and said, oh, is this a drop-in centre for disabled people? And then they would rightly come in and air their grievances about where they're not being able to find the support they need, or how the works reflected in some of the kind of more negative lived experiences, how people reflected and related to those themselves as well. And again, thankfully, Fee is also like extended member of the team, and they have lots of that knowledge already, so they were able to they were the perfect person in the space to do that signposting. But where they didn't have that knowledge, we then again went back to the partners and said, we're realising that people come into the space need more signposting. Can you send me links for various different types of DDN experiences and where they can access support, or just generally, and then I prepared it all into a document and then gave it to Fee, so for the remainder of the exhibition, anyone that needed that, they could take it away or get their email address and email it to them. And there was lots of conversations as well about how even if one of the artworks didn't relate to that own person's lived experience, so say for example there was a poem that was about visual impairment specifically, but people that weren't visually impaired but were DDN still really resonated with the statements in that poem. So that came up a lot as well, about the interconnectedness of different lived
We had
experiences.
a wall, didn't a chalk wall where people that was amazing, right? Do you remember some of the things that were written on there? They were quite powerful, weren't they?
Yeah, there were. I mean, I can't remember specifically, but what I did feel from that wall and just in general was that there was like real courage and bravado and resilience of people, as well as a little bit of a moan. It was like which they're right to do. It was a moan with a little bit of but we're going to keep going anyway. You know, we're going to keep at this. And I thought that was really like wonderful to experience and be part of. Yeah.
What I recognise is that there just isn't enough in Peterborough for the DDN community, especially some type of hub, like they said. What do you think we might at Peterborough Presents might be doing in the future, do you think, around that? Or if anything? Because there seems to be a serious lack of something.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like I was saying before the podcast about someone that says they're a local artist. You know, I'm a local artist, rather than just saying I'm an artist. And I think you just I always use this phrase, take the village wherever you go. And I think it's the same with each of our projects and events, wherever we are. We will become a hub where people from the DDN community will feel comfortable to be either to come along and access the work that we're doing, or to be able to help us shape it, or to be able to come and have a moan and a cup of tea, you know, or not, come and just enjoy it. I think whatever we do, I think we will be little hubs of that. And hopefully that kind of like makes other people think we should be doing the same. And then there'll be more opportunities. Because even if you just have one venue that everybody, like you said, that everybody can go to, that probably isn't going to be accessible for everybody. So therefore it should just be wherever you go.
So as an arts organisation, we have to fundraise, right? We have to get the money in. Do you think it's been advantageous to open ourselves up to the DDN community, because we now have, am I right in saying, more people coming to events because they're accessible?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
More
do you want
DDN
some stats?
artists apply. What?
do you want some stats?
I do want some stats.
Stats.
Right, this is what we're talking about, because
So,
we
yeah.
want to give our information to other arts and creative organisations to say, actually, when you open yourself up to the DDN community, not only are you opening yourself up to a massive untapped market, but it might actually help you financially when you're fundraising.
Yeah.
So stats are...
I think so. We started work in earnest probably at back end of 2021-22, didn't we? So, but in that 2021-22, we had 13% of our audiences identified as as being affected a little or a lot by a disability, or being deaf or neurodivergent. In fact, I don't even think neurodivergence came into it at that point. And then now, more recently, that's 45% of our audience. So it's been a huge change. I think one of those changes also, which I think is really important, is, and through our funders, we meant to ask the question, are you affected a little or a lot? We don't ask that. We do ask that question, but we also ask what disability or people might have. So have they got a visual impairment? Have they got a learning disability? Is it a hidden disability? What is it? And people can identify that. They can choose not to completely.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
people's prerogative. But what's interesting for us for that is that it tells us a lot more about our audiences, and therefore how we can support them in terms of engaging with creativity. But we've had people at events where they've gone, oh, so it's all of that. Oh, and they'd written down, I've got a back injury and things like that, or I've got a back. So it's giving people the power then to actually write down. They feel able to say, I've got a hidden disability, I've got this, I need this requirement. And actually, that's not people being demanding. That's just allowing us to think, well, how can we make you feel really welcome and supported in terms of what we're doing with you?
You've just reminded me, one of the other things Fee said in the space was about, again, it comes back to that word neurodivergence and that boom. Lots of people that came in and spoke to Fee maybe asked what it meant because they didn't know, and then when Fee
asked what
neurodivergence meant, what's the definition of it, they didn't know what it meant. So then when Fee gave that definition, they were like, oh, so me. So again, it's that revelation of the terminology, and it comes back to that our ability to understand people's differences and requirements, so that we can kind of put as much in place as we can.
Have we found anything difficult or problematic, would you say? Because, like we've talked a lot of the positive stuff, but there are difficulties. Of course there are. Some of that is like there's just so very few venues that are properly accessible, that's out of our control. But have you found anything? Is there anything
I think
that
just don't take like feedback that you might get about anything that your projects that you're doing. Don't take it personally, and try and learn from it. So
Do you mean negative feedback?
Well, it feels. I think, we've had feedback in a particular fashion because the person might be autistic, and the way that they might phrase stuff isn't as soft and fluffy as maybe, and all the nuances that people that are not autistic kind of put on to make it feel a bit softer.
Yeah.
And then you could feel a bit like, oh, like you're having a go at me kind of thing, and you could take it personally. And I think the best thing to do is to not take that personally and go, okay, I've learnt something and I can move on, and just, like I said, making that effort.
And I guess understanding, once you start to understand different styles of patterns and behaviour, so when you know that some people who are on the autism spectrum might not be as fluffy, can be a little bit more direct, once you start to work out, okay, that's their style, they're not going out to be
horrible to you, it's not
horrible or
about
unkind,
you.
it's just how they communicate.
Yeah, and I think it's things like that, or like when we've, for instance, of venues, we've not been able to pass that on to the people that we've worked with, and there's been a mistake. I think it's not taking it to heart and then deciding not to do it at all. It's like, right, okay, take that on and then move forward and learn from it.
Yeah, we've not been. I think it's been trying not to be defensive about it, but actually hold our hands up and go, oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But how do we change that?
Yeah.
can you help us? How do we actually adapt it so we don't fall down that kind of same
But none of it was
problem again?
massively wrong. I mean,
No.
like none of what we did was so bad that we just went, oh God, we really dropped one here. There was it was subtler things, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah, I would say only by our standards, 'cause I think as a team we all really care about like people's experiences, and we want to get things right for people. And then if something's slightly wrong, I think by our own standards we're like, oh, I dropped the ball on that, or I didn't get that right. But at the end of the day, if we don't know because we've never been told, then we are going to make not mistakes, but we're not going to be able to make things accessible. So when someone does say, actually, you thought about this, rather than going, oh, no, I haven't, and we go, no, I haven't. All right, next time we'll do it this way.
The year before we did reasonable adjustments, we did put a commission out called Side by Side, which was meant to, we were trying to probably shoehorn too many things together, which was International Day of People with Disabilities and International Women's Day. And we got a whole load of proposals in. And I think in reading it through, we realised how maybe confusing it was for the artists as well, but also recognised that the relationships that we'd wanted to build through that project would feel rushed. And we wouldn't have been able to respond in the more authentic way that maybe we have with reasonable adjustment. So we did pull that project, didn't we? When we did slightly different things, but we honoured the time commitment of those artists that had put proposals together and explained why we were pulling it. And it allowed us to take a step back, sit with the partners and think, how do we do this properly so that we don't feel like we're rushing it and not treating people's kind of contributions with respect. So I think that was quite a big decision. That was a good chunk of cash that we had to then try and work out with, work with funders to move down the road and things like that. But it was recognising, so we've got little things that we've kind of had to twist and change a little bit.
Because we made a decision to not just be a tick box type organisation, but actually we're going to fully commit to this. And that does take time.
And that allowed us then
to do a really good project.
Exactly.
So it was quite, But I think so. It was that thing of it was recognising when maybe things, having that gut feeling you knew something wasn't quite going as it should do, and being able to kind of sit back and just go, okay,
But that's brave in terms of an organisation making that decision, because sometimes you can go, we'll just put it on anyway. But we didn't. So what next for us at Peterborough Presents and the D
More.
tomorrow? More. Right, so if you are a local person to and in and around Peterborough and you have some great creative artistic ideas and you're disabled in some way, come to us.
Come to us,
absolutely. Yeah. All our contact details are on our website, peterboroughpresents.org. But we're all about making more friends, and there'll definitely be ways for people to get involved. Like we've all said, not a tick box for us, it's genuine. So we're committed to RAD 2.0, whatever that is.
Can't wait. What's
And
RAD 2.0 going to be, Keely?
Oh, no idea. It'll be up to the communities and the panels that we work with.
And I think it's also what's for me the thing. I was talking to somebody recently who was a visually impaired writer and theatre director, and saying that, you know, yes, we will have RAD 2.0 and we will ideally be having artists working alongside us who identify as deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. Actually, that's not where you're pigeonholed in, you know what I mean, any of our other projects. Do you know what I mean? We really want artists from all different walks of life that are involved in those different projects as well. So we've got a load of opportunities coming up at the moment. You know, they're open to anybody. So, and all the applied learning that we've learned through doing reasonable adjustment and what have you is in those projects.
Yeah, because it's, absolutely, we are going to be working with more DDN creatives. But, you know, when we have a non-DDN creative that we are working with, it's making sure that event is accessible to DDN people and their families and friends to be able to come and enjoy that creative space, right?
Yeah. Completely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So shall we do top tips?
Yeah.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
Right, top tips,
Charlie's
Charlie.
been really
give me
thinking
some
about
top
it.
tips.
Typical Virgo, and I've got my answer.
Pisces, I'm just going to make it up on the spot.
My top tips would be kind of digital bits. So people that use screen readers, like if you make information on your website and you hyperlink something to a link elsewhere, you'd often just click here. Right? Okay. The default is so that it's short, it's snappy, just have click here and you'd hyperlink it or have a button and it takes you elsewhere. But when a screen reader reads this, the links appear at the bottom. So it just comes up with a series of click here, click here, click here, click here, click here. So for the person using it, they have no idea which button corresponds to which bit.
Got you.
So instead, it's really important that the phrasing is really clear about where that click will take you to. So it might be like download the reasonable adjustment artist brief, or click here to be redirected to our booking, or book your tickets here. Phrasing like that for anything that's hyperlinked and takes you elsewhere. That's my top tip.
Amazing.
And I got that actually from the Digital Culture Network that Arts Council run.
Okay.
So they did some digital access training, and we'd been working with you for a fair amount of time by that point, so there wasn't too much that I personally took from it apart from that. But it is a good resource for particularly people that are starting out there.
And that's the Digital
Culture Network on Arts Council's website. I think you can find it on there.
You've just got your Arts Council brownie point in there as well, haven't you?
Post again.
They will be coming to you again in the future.
Yes.
Your top tip?
I'm going to end up wanting 3. So a very practical one for me, which Keely mentioned when we were talking earlier about what to expect when you come to an event, is just being really explicit on and write as much as you can about what people will experience. When I go to an event, I like to know when I can leg it. So I like to know what, you know, and things like that. So as much as what you can write about the venue and how long it's going to be and all that kind of stuff, but just write what to expect within your narrative on the description on the website or on any flyers. There was a top tip that somebody mentioned in our discussion with Sunny, which was to listen, not to listen to respond, but listen to learn. And that will sit with me quite well. It's about how we listen. It's active listening, isn't it? But that's something. And what was my third one going to be? I'll come back to that.
Okay.
There was a third one.
I feel like they've stolen all my top tips.
Oh, man.
I don't know. I suppose, I think for me personally now, it's changed my whole focus and the way I see the world. But particularly when I'm going and producing an event and I'm going into a venue or even like, for instance, recently there is someone that comes along to one of our projects in Orton and they have fibromyalgia. And at one point, you know, just being able to say, you stop, you don't need to do all of that because I know that might cost you a day in bed tomorrow. So just those little things of just doing better front of house and just seeing things differently, and I would say has really helped me as a top tip. So I really consider a venue now and I go, well, that's quite near for them to go to the toilet and there's plenty of seats there, and actually that's a flat access, or we can get a brew or we can get water if we need it.
Yes, because the brew is the most important thing, I would say, right?
And I would say definitely since, particularly at the moment, being able to offer someone a refreshment and a biscuit has
Yeah.
become the most important thing that we offer, I would say, because it's that hospitality and welcome. We don't do it every event, but we try and sneak a biscuit in where we can.
We do good food at our events, don't we? I mean, like, we go for it. Well, we team up with Metal quite a lot, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And
yeah.
Food is at the core of what they are up
Absolutely.
to. Yeah.
Have you thought of your third tip?
It is. My third one relates to you, Julie Fernandez, as well.
Oh.
It's also to work, if you can, if there's ever any money at all, bring in an access coordinator, to somebody who can really help you, guide you through a lot of this work, and you've opened doors for us in lots of ways to different partners and to different ways of thinking. If you can't do that amount, we even down to it sounds really, I don't know where this, simplest thing was when we looked at the reasonable adjustment exhibition space, we were kind of going, can we get in there if you're in a wheelchair, and what size are wheelchair? And we lovingly commandeered somebody on the road, didn't we? Outside the shop, she was a wheelchair and went, do you mind just coming in and just checking this? And she was like, oh, this works, what are you doing in here? And it opened up a whole conversation. She probably came back, but it's working with people who have that lived experience, and wherever ever possible, honouring that financially as well. But I think that's been having discussions and not dreaming up and thinking you know the answer, but actually asking people the questions. Yeah,
I've got another one.
Go on.
There's another Julie one.
Give us.
No
You've got to have some as
all
well.
caps writing.
Yes.
No capital letters.
Oh man, I've been
That's the
driving
one-
you mad
that's
with
the
that,
one
haven't I?
I still have to clock myself. It's because I'm a poet. I like things in all caps, like titles.
Is it because it's bold?
Yeah, maybe. I
So
think
could
it's a
you bold
distinction.
it?
Yeah.
Right,
And
can
we do
change the-
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So fonts are a huge important thing to consider when you're creating publications like marketing, social media stuff. It's important that you have something that is primarily sans serif is the most accessible of the various fonts. But yeah, all caps is inaccessible for
I
lots of
can
people.
leave now. My
You've
work
done
is done.
it. You've done it. It's in my head.
What's your 2 top tips?
How long have we got? I think it's being open, like you guys have been, totally open to exploring it and not worrying about what hasn't been done yet, but kind of moving forward and saying, oh, let's just embrace it. And if you're going to do this, get your advice from someone from the DDN community. Don't go to a non-disabled person to come in to your organisation and say, right, tell us how to make ourselves accessible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, that should be obvious,
Yeah.
but it really isn't obvious. But yeah.
Yeah.
We really hope everyone has enjoyed listening to us talking about really how to make creativity accessible and actually that it's doable, it's not as expensive or complicated as you think it might be, and that you can open yourself up to so much more by doing that. And if anyone's got any questions or just want to chat to us a bit more about that, can they do that? How would they contact us?
Peterborough Presents at neamparktrust.org.uk, because Neam Park Trust are our lovely parents. They look after us.
We love Neam Park.
Or via just checking out the website as well. Our details are on there, which is peterboroughpresents.org.
And come to our events.
Yeah. Come say hey.
Yeah.
This podcast was created by Peterborough Presents and hosted by myself, Julie Fernandez. It was produced by Red 7 Productions. We couldn't have done the work we've been talking about without the support of our marvellous partners, Peterborough and District Deaf Children's Society, RNIB, Peterborough Council for Voluntary Services, Scope, Disability Peterborough, Law Green and Hannah Shingler, Faye Kilburn, Sunny Nwachaku, Fiona Kifaldi, Goldhay Arts and Queensgate Shopping Centre. This podcast was funded by the Arts Council England as part of the Creative People and Places programme.